So, David, again, thanks so much for taking the time to chat. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Thank you, Allan, for having me. Yeah, so I'm David Baylis. I created my own company called David Baylis Design, in which I specialize in automotive rendering, real-time automotive rendering. I happen also to contract with Epic Games. It's been about 4 years now where I create demo content for them and go to trade shows, do some talks with them. And I also work with different car manufacturers such as Rivian, Porsche, or Volvo.
It's cool. I love that. I'm kind of curious for you, did you always imagine yourself being in some kind of creative career, like early in your career, or is this something that you fell into?
Oh, I didn't expect that at all. In fact, I was more leaning into the business side of things, and it started really as a career in the bank, actually, which is completely different. But the funny thing is that I always had a creative mind, and every time I would come back from work, I would hop on to 3ds Max and create some worlds and look on tutorials. So actually, I was spending more time on 3ds Max than working on finance. And then it's funny because my mom noticed that and said, "Hey, are you sure you want to work at the bank?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know, And eventually, I got into 3D school. And that's where I really started embracing my passion for 3D.
For you, kind of having that thing of this is where I'm putting most of my time and perhaps not getting the fulfillment I want out from it, and this is the area that I'm getting the most fulfillment with the little time that I'm putting in. What was that transition like, and how did you know it was time to kind of pull the trigger and go all in?
Oh, look, it was a little scary, especially for my parents, I would say, because when they listen to you and they hear, "Hey, I want to be an artist," compared to a stable job in the finance, they're like, "Are you sure, son?" I was like, "Yeah, I want to give it a try." When you have that passion in you and you just want to go for it. And yeah, at first, it's baby steps. You just discovering the world of 3D, and you look into ArtStation and you see all these amazing artists, and you're just overwhelmed with the quality of the work, and you're like, well, am I going to be up there one day? And I think the interesting thing is just that journey that you take and just following that passion that you have and going just 100% towards it. And that's what I've been doing since I started 3D, was just committing 100% of my time to 3D. So I actually started with architecture, which was sort of my go-to thing. I was really interested in interior lighting, so I just studied interior lighting a lot and watched any sort of magazines or tutorials or books that I would find, and just really master interior lighting. And then progressively, I would, once I feel comfortable in that program, I would start doing some other things like environments or particle effects or even automotive, which is what I do full time now.
Just to touch on ArtStation for a second, I was curious for you, what was it ever intimidating for you? Was it inspiring for you to go on and see like all these amazing artists like putting out work constantly? Because I feel like some people it kind of crushes the spirits of like, I'm never going to be that good, versus some people I think it's like, wow, like I want to do that. I want to be that good one day.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I was part of those people who were intimidated at first when I discovered ArtStation. You know what? I was also inspired by it. I was like, wow, that's possible in that program. And sometimes you can barely tell it's CG. It's so realistic.
Mm-hmm.
I was mostly impressed by character artists. I find those are always jaw-dropping, what they managed to achieve. And that was scary. I was like, I'm learning how to light interior for houses, but learning something for a character is completely different set of skills. And yeah, I was a little scared at first, but I just kept doing my thing and not worrying about it. And then eventually got to a very good level where I feel comfortable posting. And now I always say to people, like, do not be scared of going on ArtStation, embrace it, inspire from it. And just continue your journey. It's a long journey. You can't arrive there and, get amazing results. It takes time, but that's the fun part of it too.
I feel like 3D, anything 3D related, it isn't something that you say, hey, I'm going to go and learn I'm going to sound condescending and say flip burgers or something, but like, a lot of things is like, okay, I'll go do my week or two of training and then that'll be my thing. And obviously, I feel like anyone who goes into 3D, it is kind of a lifetime. Like I say it all the time to people around me, like, I've been doing this a long time. I definitely do not know everything. I probably know 20%, and that's just it. Like, it's just this infinite thing. I guess, like, what are your thoughts on that in terms of understanding how much of an investment it is? Because it definitely is something that you're going to be learning for many years.
It does require, some time, but again, if passion is there, which I think, most 3D artists are, it's really not a problem. When I look back, I'm like, okay, yeah, that now I feel, very good, at what I do, and I'm still learning. Actually, there's always things to learn, as you say. But yeah, the first few steps are, you're discovering things, and your artwork is not the best, but it's actually good to reflect back on it and be a bit nostalgic on it and be like, oh yeah, I've done that, and here's the progress that I've done. And that's really the fun part of it. For 3D, it does require some time. And as you said, like programs, even if we've been using them for 10 years, I still discover new features of a program, which is crazy. So yeah, it's always changing, it's always evolving, and it's never the same every day, at least in my case.
I love that. I was curious too, like for you, when did you get into creating car renderings and more automotive design?
So that's interesting. I've always been a car addict. I've always loved cars since I was a kid. Obviously in 3D, I was a little scared to jump in that field, which is why I started with architecture. I could do some simple boxes and interiors, and I was like, okay, that's good enough for me, and I can start slowly. I saw some really cool renderings, done with 3ds Max, Corona, V-Ray, those type of programs, and I was really interested into doing it, but I was just really focused on architecture and the rise of real time. So when I started really digging into 3D, that was back in 2013. And, we had a couple of game engines there. So, Unreal was there, Unreal 3, not 4, Unity and CryEngine. CryEngine was, top of the game before, and it was really good open source too. So you could, download the engine and start playing with it. I was playing games at the time, Crysis and other games. And when I saw the cinematics, I was like, I'm convinced that, real time is what you need. I wanted that tool to even do my assignments that I had to do at school. I wanted to get, lead over the others, and render times being cut in half or by 10 times. So I could do my projects faster and, go party. Yeah, I did, try CryEngine and, did my assignments on there, and did some environments and that stuff. And I was like, wow, this is good. I can actually see what I'm doing, because, if you, 3ds Max or my, back then the viewport, it's full of proxies and boxes, and you can't really see what's going on, right? So the fact that I was able to see in real time my environment was amazing. And it's funny, when I gave that assignment, the teacher didn't even realize it was CryEngine, and I did that in like 2 days compared to like 2 weeks for the others. Mm-hmm. And I got loads of free time, and that's where I was like, okay, yeah, this is this is the future. Like, this is what I need to use.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating to seeing how much has changed in the last few years, especially both with GPUs. Thank you, NVIDIA. GPUs getting so much faster and more powerful has opened up so many doorways, and then I was talking about IPRs and interactive renderings yesterday, and it's still like in most packages it's still not real time. Like, sure, you can like tweak your settings to get down to that, but it's a whole different conversation. In fact, I was having this conversation yesterday about, I still have my oldest render that I still have is from, I think, 97, and it was 27 hours to render a single frame. And so I ended up rendering one frame instead of the whole animation that I spent weeks like animating. But just knowing that it's changed so much has definitely opened up so many new pathways. How does someone really get started these days if they were to really want to say, including myself, because like I've supervised projects that have Unreal, but at the same time, I definitely haven't really jumped all in on doing real time for production. And it's something that I see the benefit there. But for you, like, what kind of resources, and also just in general, the kind of mindset to go into for learning this kind of stuff, like what tips or advice would you give?
You know, real time has definitely come a long way since the days. And I think movie industries and AEC saw that potential of real time, and now, you know, the tools are becoming wider and wider in terms of, you know, the array of tools that can be used for those industries. And for the case of Unreal, yes, it started as a game engine to develop games, and now it's just a huge, massive tool that can do automotive, architecture, simulation, and all of those. So there's a lot embedded in there, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming if you're opening up the program. If you're opening up the program right now, yeah, there's a lot going on. I think the best resource, of course, would be YouTube. It's always has been, and sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming because there's like too many tutorials, and sometimes there's like 10 ways of lighting things. But we do actually have the Unreal developer community for Unreal, which is a forum dedicated for questions, and it also has courses offered for free. So you have, you know, courses for lighting, courses to create a configurator, courses for product design. So you can just really like choose one of the courses and just like focus on that. And anything that you choose is always going to be used for something else. If you do architecture, it's going to be, you know, lighting is going to be used also in automotive. So any path that you choose is always going to help you use Unreal Engine anyway.
And I was curious too, like for you, has there been any really big innovations that you've seen recently that you've been excited about? Because again, like pretty much every time I open up my laptop, it's just, I'm blown away with some new announcement or some new thing. So for you, like what are the things that really catch your attention?
For me, the biggest change and innovation was, was actually creation. No, maybe innovation, I would say. Ray tracing. So ray tracing was solely reserved for offline renders before, and when that came out to public in 2018 for real-time engines, that was a huge game changer. Huge, just massive, especially for automotive, because, you know, anything reflective would definitely show you know, all the rays and, you know, the accurate reflections there. So for automotive, it was a huge game changer. And that's where I switched actually when the technology came out. I was like, okay, now David, it's time to move on. You can do some automotive. I don't have to like fake any shadows or reflections or place these sphere reflections anywhere. Like it was just, you know, pretty accurate. So that was a very, very good innovation you know, by NVIDIA that I actually assisted at the conference in 2018, which was held in Vancouver actually. Yeah, that was a huge, huge moment there. I think another big one is AI. That's also, you know, coming into development pretty fast. And I think so. We can talk more in details on that one, but it's also been very interesting to see what the capabilities of artificial intelligence in the 3D world is doing.
Yeah, every day again. I'm like, I get stressed at work because I'm like, I don't have time for my job anymore. I just need to be like looking at every single new AI announcement all day, every day. We've been connected for a long time on LinkedIn, and I've definitely been living vicariously through a lot of the renderings that you've put out. And it's something too that just, in fact, I think I never really thought about it till just now, but I think in a lot of ways it was to me the benchmark of seeing the improvements. I was just kind of more looking at that as like, okay, where are the standards right now for real-time rendering of cars? Because I mentioned my wife's in that industry, and I've definitely dabbled a lot kind of secretly behind the scenes on doing photoreal car renderings, and for me it's always been offline rendering, but at the same time like it's kind of been okay, where's David at with this photoreal stuff? Like when's the time to to go all in? What's that journey been like for you?
Look, it's been great and extremely challenging because I've used V-Ray, I've used Corona, and they still have amazing visuals that it's hard to tackle with real-time rendering. I have to admit. But the fun thing is I just like pushing the engine to the limits with Unreal Engine, and I just want to make it look super realistic, close to V-Ray, close to path tracing quality, which now we do have path tracer inside Unreal, which is funny for real-time render. But I think in a few years' time we're going to get real-time path tracing technology. So yeah, it's been a very interesting challenge because, as I said, before ray tracing you had to do a lot of faking to get shadows under the car. That was just not working before because there was no ray traced AO. So you had to put cut out the silhouette of the car, go into Photoshop, do an alpha, and then project a decal with a alpha plane just under the car, so you'd have a shadow. Those were the kind of techniques that I was using before, but it never looks accurate with the RT technology. So it just really helped get the accurate reflections and everything. And there's still a bit of challenge getting photorealism out of a game engine. I mean, they've come really far, but if you're trying to tackle the big ones like V-Ray, you're up for it for quite a challenge. But that's what I like doing. I like pushing the limits of the engine and just exploring the hidden features of what Unreal can offer. And there's a lot of console variables and hidden things inside the engine that I just love digging up and being, oh yeah, I found a new one that just allows me to unlock that extra pixel to make it nicer. And that's the fun thing. I just love doing that.
Path tracing versus real time, especially with RTX ray tracing these days, like where do you think the pros and cons are for each if someone was to try to decide between, hey, let me just build an entirely real-time solution, or okay, I'm still going to be leveraging the GPU using Unreal or whatever engine of choice, but deciding to go more of a more in-depth rendering solution?
Yeah, it's funny. I get that question a lot, especially now Unreal offers both path tracer and real time. And people are like, what should I choose? Well, first of all, Unreal is a real-time solution. So you always start in a real-time viewport anyways. The path tracing was actually introduced for sort of a ground truth reference for yourself. So if you had a real-time scene, you could flick on path tracer to just give you an idea if you're close to the photoreal results. So it really gave you just a sense of idea there to guide you as an artist. But the con of it is it's slower than real time. So real time should be really used if you're looking to gain time and efficiency, and you really want to just slay through the render times. It's going to be much faster, but there's a bit more tricks involved to, let's say, get lighting or shadowing or certain effects looking like a path tracer, because of course ray tracing is cutting corners to make it fast, right, and run in real time. So that's sort of the trick here for you. I'd say ray tracing if you're like looking to do some fast render times, path tracing if you're looking for that photorealism, and if you're patient enough, which I'm not. So I go with real time most of the time.
Yeah. Again, it's just night and day different from the days of even I work in visual effects, so it's still send it to the farm, and I'm having that conversation multiple times, even in dailies yesterday, where it's like, well, let's not focus on this because you're not going to be able to get another version out for the afternoon for our delivery. So let's just switch to something that you can get out. And the thing is, with real time, it's doing the work is doing the part that is the time consuming part, not doing the work and then you got to hit a button and let the machines do their thing. So it's definitely changed over time.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, coming back to the real-time viewport feedback, it's also good just to see that, sometimes you've offset the grass by just a little and it's floating in the air. You can like see that immediately. Whereas, before I would, hit render, come the next day and then notice that, my grass is floating in the air and I have to redo that again. So yeah, it definitely helps speed up and being efficient.
And again, I feel like every question I'm throwing at you is a much bigger question than one that can be answered shortly. But I was curious, like, what's your general workflow for starting a new scene or project? In other words, like perhaps digging up reference and figuring out like what it is you're going for. Like, what generally is your workflow for creating a new photoreal image? And by the way, for anyone who's not familiar with your website, definitely take a look at all the amazing car renderings that are on there. It's pretty phenomenal.
Thank you, Allan. So like for inspiration, it can be a broad array of subjects. Sometimes it can be just, looking through a magazine, and car photographers are huge inspiration. So I see, how they shoot, and I try to replicate that inside Unreal. Sometimes it can just be watching a movie. I can, capture a scene there in my head and be like, wow, that's amazing. I need to like, pause this, take a picture, and just set that in a pure ref and just start creating my scene. And lately, coming back to the AI subjects, I've been using Midjourney also to give me some inspiration too. Just playing around with it and just typing a few prompts and just seeing what it can give me. And I've also tried, replicating some scenes from Midjourney inside Unreal, which was pretty interesting. And do an A/B comparison on social media and say, hey, which one do you think is AI generated and which one do you think it's Unreal? And those are pretty fun. People like voting on those, so it's just a fun community challenge thing.
What's the response on that? I'm curious.
Yeah, so some people get it because there's quite a few like technical people who are gonna like zoom in and be like, oh yeah, that's definitely Unreal. There's like a screen space reflection, something like going on there, so it's definitely Unreal. But I'd say most of the people, like 60% would guess that mine is AI generated. So it's funny to like fool around with people's perceptions sometimes, and just get an idea of that. And sometimes I would also do get the reference image, so like a real car photo, and do that exactly the same inside Unreal. And there's some people who are really going to like zoom in into the details and be like, oh yeah, do you think I'm stupid? No, I can tell. Yeah. Yeah. So no, this is pretty fun, especially like doing this inside Unreal. I think it just brings a lot of value, and showcasing the power of the GPU too is it's cool, because that really came a long way too compared to before, where it was mostly CPU based. Leveraging GPU now just for faster renders and getting that result quality is pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, the first time I'd ever really seen GPUs really make an impact, other than, let's say, in video games and things that we traditionally have associated with, is working in Industrial Light and Magic. We had created software. I wasn't involved in it, but they developed a fluid software which was leveraging GPU rather than CPU, and it was just much faster, especially leveraging CUDA. That was something that just blew me away, especially talking with IT over there, because I was saying how it's really changed how things are done, just because suddenly they're not having these machines that just become redundant and they go throw out the window. Instead, the effects people would get the most powerful video card, but as those video cards get older, as new ones come out, they'd get passed down to the next person. There's always a use for them, and not only were GPUs much faster, but it also meant that it was more practical to continue to leverage that, rather than like, all right, the CPU is old, it's useless now, let's throw it out. And just everything kind of like fit together really nicely. And since then, it's just continued to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's I get what you mean. Like the power of the GPUs really changed the game, and they come with bigger and bigger stats. Faster than CPUs. And I'm just really impressed now by just the size of how the video memory has gone up crazy. Like now these new cards like pack 48 gigabytes VRAM, which I mean that's crazy. Back when I started, which was around 2012 2013, 2, 4, 6 gigabytes was pretty good back then. But now it's all about, you need 4K 8K textures, which can be loaded instantly on the video memory, which is pretty good. You get the results instant, and you're not limited by any sort of technical limitations.
You also brought up AI. That definitely for me has become a bit of a fascination. Just in general, I've been doing a lot on the side, just programming a lot of AI and building a lot of tools, and just seeing what other people who are much smarter than me have been doing with it it's been phenomenal. And I realize the whole world is going to, for the most part, in the same boat. So for you, like, where have been some areas that you've seen AI really impact you day to day, and also just what areas have really excited you to want to explore more?
When I first saw what Midjourney could do, I have to admit I was a little scared for my career. And I was like, oh, is this the end? And then, I think with every new technology, you just have to embrace it and, evolve with it. And I started, using it more and more actually. And like, well, I just need to use this and see what the hype is about. So I started, creating a couple of things and, testing a few prompts, and I was like, okay, this is cool, but it's not, accurate for automotive yet. So I'm not feeling threatened. It's actually, I'm using this more as a inspiration for myself. So in terms of image generation, yes, it's for that case, I use it for inspiration. Now there's been some really interesting research also for having AI in games, for example. So you could have now these NPCs with complete AI dialogue, which I find is just impressive. And you just can spend hours talking to an NPC now.
Make friends out on the street in
exactly. And I've seen some videos about it, and it's just that's really impressive. And also there's it's going to help you for programming, for example. So during the keynotes that happened in SIGGRAPH just a few weeks ago in LA, NVIDIA released this program called Chat USD, which is pretty much like Chat GPT, but for Omniverse, and it really allows the artist to just help you create some simple functions inside the engine. So if you want to make an array of objects, you can simply type in, make an array of 10 items of this, what I have in the viewport, and it would write the script for you in a pretty efficient way. So for simple functions like that, I think it can really help. Obviously we still need programmers to do the more complex areas. But I think it really saves time to do simple functions, which, for me, I'm more of a visual artist. I mean, programming can be a little daunting sometimes. So just having a little bit of assistance is more than welcomed. And since I've seen all of these improvements, I'm like, yes, I think that's the way to go. And AI is being really pushed right now, so there's just no choice than to go with it and evolve with the technology.
I love that. Yeah, it's definitely been something that I've been more and more fascinated with day to day. And you're right, like programming, I've found it's a great way to kind of get a quick answer rather than needing to Google 100 things, go to Stack Overflow. And I have just recently, like just the other weekend, written my first program where I didn't actually do a single line of code. And to me, that was just impressive just because that's where we're headed, where a lot of this, it's kind of like supervising someone where you're getting the result you want through the extension of someone else. And in this case, it is through a computer, but it's pretty fascinating. Video games as well, I'm definitely really blown away by the whole concept of having NPCs. Like NVIDIA put out a video not that long ago, it was like bartender having a conversation with you.
Oh yeah.
In that one moment, it was just like, oh crap, like I hadn't even thought about that. Like that's going to change everything. Just being able to ask for directions when you're trying to get to your mission.
Yeah.
Like, I'm lost. Where do I get the blue card?
Yeah, exactly. Oh God, that's so funny. Yeah. When I remember playing Doom back in the day and, finding these blue and red and yellow cards, now you can just ask the NPC. Yeah. Just made it so easy now. Yeah. Everything now is AI. Even we get the frame generation to boost your FPS, which is AI generated too. So loads of topics.
What bad habits do you think, or perhaps I don't want to say mistakes, but mistakes people make with the assumption of DLSS? In other words, hey, I'll just do it 100 by 100 and just upscale it to 1000 and AI magic.
Yes. So DLSS is it's been very helpful in real time because, as I said, if you want to push the limits of the engine, you start overloading the tool with textures and assets and polygons. So we were limited with the amount of polygons in the engine, right? That was before Unreal Engine 5 and their nanite system. Now, you can load super high res assets in the engine. So you're not so much limited by polygons anymore, but sometimes the texture can overload and drop the FPS there for you. You start running into a 4K monitor and you're displaying that real time with everything loaded. It's starting to chug a little bit and you're starting to drop into the 10 FPS zone. And that's starting to be a little complicated, to navigate. It will give you a headache for sure. So what DLSS does, it's going to downscale the frame for you, and then AI upscale it to the native resolution. So it's going to, for example, I'm on the 4K monitor, it's going to downscale to 1080p and upres that AI generated at 4K. So you're basically getting the same results. Pretty accurate, but you're like doubling the FPS there, which is very useful. Again, made by NVIDIA there, and it's really helped the workflow for real-time artists. And now they've just announced DLSS 3.5, which also enhances ray tracing. So, ray tracing has its limitations, and they've done a demo with showcasing Cyberpunk 2077, where emissive lighting is actually emitting proper light with the help of DLSS 3.5, which is AI generated also. And that's going to, boost the emissive textures into the scene and have, this really nice global illumination going, which, ray tracing sometimes has a bit of difficulty doing on its own. So it's just going to help you boost that emissiveness into the scene. Yeah, DLSS is not a magic solution. Don't expect to switch it on and It doesn't mean you have to not optimize your game. You still have to do that. I think some developers sometimes would rely that on a little too much, and not optimize as much. There's still some optimization to do, but it does definitely help alleviate a couple of problems for real time, for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, I have seen a few bad habits where I've caught artists that were on projects where they're just DLSS for everything, and then it's like, all right, we'll turn it off, and it's like, now let's go for 1080p. Oh, we're at 10 FPS. Let's set the bench a little bit higher than that before we start looking at the next step. But it is amazing, and again, that was also one of those areas that the first time I ever came across it is just like, of course, like that makes total sense. And even a lot of map painters I know will kind of the other way around work at, let's say, 8K or 12K, then downscale, but like that extra detail that kind of gets crunched into the image that otherwise wouldn't have been there is like, they're the little things that people catch, and having that, just the micro detail, is what really makes up reality versus what we're typically used to with the texture.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
What are some of the areas in the automotive industry that you are either servicing or that you've been really impressed by? I've got friends at Magnopus who do a lot of real-time VR car configurators and things like that. Just in general, I've always been pretty impressed with just some of the stuff being done in that area. So for you, like, what has that been, and what's caught your eye?
In the automotive industry, yeah, definitely the configurators, and that's what got me started, because when I was configuring my Lamborghinis and Ferraris back at the time, and as a kid, I was like, I couldn't really I couldn't really see enough details, and I was like, well, if I'm going to buy this car, I want to see exactly what I am ordering. So if I click an option and I want to like the carbon fiber package, I want to see that displayed correctly and not just a JPEG image. And that's what really got me started into automotive, and starting with configurators. And yeah, I think that's now what car manufacturers are going, at least the ones who are leaning towards real-time automotive, building these configurators. It's really good for the customers, because they can, spin around the car and zoom in into the details, and they can actually like see what they're getting. So they click one option, one package, and it's displayed on it pretty correctly. So that's been a great innovation. It still has to come quite a long way, because obviously with the limitations of web streaming, but it's coming there. Aston Martin, for example, have done a pretty good job on that. And the second thing I like also in the automotive industry, and I've actually experienced that while I was working at Rivian, it was collaborating with them on the project, so on the CAD file of the R1T pickup truck. So we were a bunch of artists. I was still in Vancouver, they were back in LA, and we were just live collaborating on this CAD file all together, including the CMF team and the engineers on the car. And we also managed to get the project VR friendly. So we got this working on a multiplayer kind of scenario where I could jump in VR, and I could have an engineer or someone from the CMF team come over, look at the car in VR and look at the car paint, and they could comment live in the experience and say, David, you need to change the paint. This is too blue. The wheel needs to be a slightly offset and have a bit of a camber. And all of this could just be done in VR. And that was really, really impressive, doing that multiplayer sort of simulation there. And I think that's going to really help just collaborate. Again, efficiency in terms of productivity. And yeah, people who weren't familiar with it also loved it, engineers, or people from the CMF team that aren't always familiar with putting a VR headset. They immediately got it, and yeah, they're almost addicted to it now, which is fun. So
I love that. I know with Unreal 5.3, that was one of the big announcements, was talking about car paint and some of the really complex layering that's gone into the shaders, and that's honestly been something that I've been really fascinated with, just replicating real car paint. And I've had a lot of meetings with 3M and Avery Dennison, a few other companies that have been developing a lot of that tech. I'll say tech in terms of the real world for what they're doing, but to see this actually in a real-time engine being run off of a GPU and kind of replicating what you see in the real world, that's really intrigued me, and I'm very curious to see like how much that's going to caught your attention as well.
So the substrate material, as we call it inside Unreal Engine, is what is going to allow you to layer multiple materials together, very similar to what V-Ray does or other render engines that do. It's been developed a lot more, and it's started as experimental in 5.1. It got a little better in 5.2, and it's only just going to get better and better in the future versions. Yes, for car paint, it's actually much nicer because we now support multi-layers, and you can have the clear coat, and you can have the metallic flakes, and then the color on top, which just makes it more, you get that sense of depth in the material, whereas before it was more flat. So you can definitely have more accuracy on that, especially for paint. So if you collaborate with official car paints, like you said, you can definitely get some good results on there. So that's going to be a big change in 5.3, and there's also some really cool other announcements. Every update I get always excited, and people are always excited with the new features that come up, substrate being one of them. There's also support for VDB. You being a huge fume effects guy, you can now import VDBs inside Unreal, and that's
excited about that.
Yeah, it's really impressive. Like we're doing a video right now for the teaser for 5.3, and it's pretty fun. I'm sure you're gonna have tons of fun with that too. And some other exciting features also that are coming that I can't talk about, but it's gonna be fun. Yeah,
love it. I want to respect your time, so we'll end it here. But again, this has been so great, David, to catch up, and definitely have to continue the conversation in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having me, Allan.